For all my viewers outside of the United States, especially those in Canada and Europe, who are frequently in my comments criticizing Americans, saying, y'all aren't doing anything. And I understand that that comes from a sense of frustration, a sense of overwhelming concern about the fact that a fascist is at the helm of the American presidency. I understand that. Believe me, we are living under fascism. We understand how bad it is, and we understand the urgency. I would like to provide y'all with some data points that might be reassuring. And actually, this is not exactly going to be a Hope Corps video, but this is a realigning our understanding of how what you're hearing in the press is not an accurate representation of what the American people are doing kind of a video. Please understand that corporate legacy media in the United States cannot be trusted to accurately tell you what's going on. They are mouthpieces of the regime. Not only are they often performing for an audience of one, Donald Trump, so that he'll give them the mergers that they want, or so that he won't file lawsuits against them, right? They are motivated by profit, not journalism. They lack journalistic integrity. They are media outlets who have bent the knee to Donald Trump. And therefore, not only do they not want to piss Trump off, but they also have a vested interest in making sure that they toe his fascist line. They suppress any information about the pro-democracy resistance. They minimize what we are doing. That is meant to make sure that people around the world think that everybody here in our borders is on board with what Trump is doing when he's obviously fucking everything up, deeply unpopular. Every poll shows that we can't fucking stand him. But also they are trying to tell the American people, if you're thinking about resisting, nobody here is really doing anything. There's no protesting, right? We're not covering it, so it must not be happening. There's no organized resistance movement. They're not giving voice to what is actually happening, the ways that the people are moving. And that's meant to make you think that if you question what's happening, if you want to organize and defend democracy, that you must be all alone, right? They want us to feel friendless and alone. They want our allies around the world to think that we're on board with what Trump is doing, so that those allies abandon us, the people. Everything you hear from corporate legacy media cannot fucking be trusted. So I get why people in other countries might be believing that Americans aren't doing anything. Likewise, I think too many people around the world, remember, fascism is on the rise in countries all over the world. So what you're watching happen in the United States, hey, y'all, something similar is probably happening in your country, and you could take notes from us because we might be just a little bit ahead of you in terms of the timeline. And maybe what we're doing might be helpful for y'all, not only in aligning your expectations, but also in understanding the ways that we organize effectively. Yeah, I wish we were like South Korea and we had a real strong opposition party in government who was willing to stop a coup while it was happening. That's not what we have in the United States. We have controlled opposition amongst the corporate democratic leadership. So it's up to us, the American people, to stop what's happening. And so many frustrated viewers in my comments have been like, when are y'all going to do something? Do something. You aren't stopping this yet. But that's because it takes time to build a mass popular movement of the people. There's a logical progression to a resistance movement. I did a video a while back on what it takes to wage an anti-coup. And that first stage of an anti-coup is complete shock, where people realize that an authoritarian is trying to dismantle their society, is trying to destroy democracy, and you're just in shock. And that takes a while. And I actually said in that video that I thought the first couple of months of 2025 were that. And then we started to get our shit together and people are building skills and we're organizing and we're coming together. You know what? I wasn't entirely accurate. So maybe this video can be a little bit of a correction on my part as well. What we saw between Donald Trump getting elected and specifically getting inaugurated and the end of 2025 was something truly historic in terms of American pro-democracy resistance, in terms of the American people coming together and exercising our First Amendment rights. It's just that you really didn't hear about it all that much in the press. And in fact, we heard from a lot of experts early on. We can argue about how many of those are backed by corporate money and dark money, APAC money, who are like, Americans are probably going to be fine with Trump. They're just going to let this happen. They're going to, they're kind of down with what his plan is. And nobody's really going to lift a finger or do anything. Nope, that was dead fucking wrong. And in fact, I want to reference here a piece that came out from Daniel Hampton, in the Raw story back at the end of February. Explosion of protests in Trump 2.0. Prove experts were dead wrong about America. Now, this piece is going to reference the work of Dr. Erica Chenoweth. Chenoweth and Maria Stephan are kind of the two experts on nonviolent resistance. Their website, wagingnonviolence.org, is very useful. Also, their book, Why Civil Resistance Works. This kind of collects and analyzes, distills down all of the academic research about nonviolent and violent resistance and successful revolutionary movements that toppled authoritarians, how that process worked, and then what came after. I think this is pretty digestible for your average person who doesn't want to be like me and get into the weeds and just read every journal article. Although if you want to, right, there's loads of citations you can just go read for yourself. You can go wade into all that, especially if you have kids in college who will let you use their JSTOR account. Okay, so this piece I think is going to illuminate two things that are really, really interesting to me. One is the scale of the American resistance movement. And in particular, the way that it started much earlier and much more vigorously than we were led to believe in the beginning of 2025. And what the implications are for us, the American people, as 2026 is unfolding. And second, I think it really illustrates how hard corporate media is suppressing the truth of the pro-democracy movement and what their agenda is. The piece starts off, America is in full revolt against President Donald Trump, according to a new analysis. New data revealed a staggering reality. President Donald Trump's second term triggered more than, I'm going to pause here. How many protests? How many protests do you think happened in 2025, specifically against the Trump regime? Understanding that the data is a little bit incomplete. This is from folks who self-reported. How about 40,000? In 2025, there were 40,000 protests in the United States against Donald Trump and his regime. How many of those did you hear about on TV? How many of those did you hear about from corporate legacy media? Remember when they didn't even want to cover Hands Off? And then No Kings 1 was a little bit bigger and more folks besides Rachel Maddow had to start covering it. And then by No Kings 2, yeah, okay, this is big enough that everybody has to pay attention and corporate media has to start reporting on it. They still massively underreported, but the movement is now so big and vigorous that they cannot turn away. But it's more than that. 40,000 protests in the United States in 2025. Honkin' waves, overpassing events, marches, rallies, people all over the country in every way. Small protests, huge protests in the millions. People are publicly resisting, insisting upon exercising their First Amendment rights. That's huge, huge, y'all. Now, at the time that I'm recording this, Chenoweth hasn't fully assessed all of their data, but as of right now, partial data covering just 41% of those protests show that 10 million participants flooded the streets nationwide. Now, Zach Beauchamp of Vox News also talked about Chenoweth's research. He said America, in their, meaning Chenoweth's view, now has a growing, durable, and disciplined pro-democracy movement. According to Chenoweth, the top three reasons for protests in 2025 were concerns about the presidency, immigration, and democracy. Zach says this data are at odds with conventional wisdom that democracy doesn't motivate voters. Experts claimed that Kamala Harris lost because she talked about democracy too much. But 2026 proves that theory wrong. Democracy is, in fact, a powerful motivating factor. When people are convinced that there's a threat to their political freedoms, they can be motivated to go to extraordinary lengths to defend them. Chenoweth said America now possesses a growing, durable, and disciplined pro-democracy movement, something that was not happening in 2024 before the election. The message is unmistakable. For the United States to make it out of its own crisis, we need to take this lesson to heart, not marginalize discussion of Trump's threats to democracy, but to bring it to the fore. We need to understand here that we cannot trust corporate legacy media to tell us the truth of how the American people are not only feeling, but also organizing and acting. Number two, I think, is that Americans before the election didn't believe Kamala Harris. Everything that she has said would be unfolding and that Donald Trump wanted to do, Project 2025 wanted to do, all the ways people laughed at her for saying those things. She's been right every fucking time, right? People did not properly assess the urgency and severity of the moment then. We do now, right? Hard lesson for us to learn. So we cannot look at the kind of apathy and, naivete that existed before the election and think that it still exists in the United States in 2026. And lastly is that the pro-democracy resistance movement in the United States is massive. We are fucking massive. And we are growing on a literal daily basis. And it's not just that the resistance movement is growing rapidly, building skills and membership. It's also that our resolve is fucking steel. None of us are laying down. None of us are going to obey these little fascist fucks. Authoritarians can't win unless we surrender. And the American people are not surrendering. We will not surrender.